Hey, folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream. And I think it's safe to say at this point that a large majority of Western Europe has abandoned Israel. And I'm sad to say it, but I think it's indisputable. Arguably, two of the three most influential, powerful countries in Europe, France and the UK. Germany would be the third, of course. But France first, and now the UK. France is flat out saying, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, we talked about this last week here on the live stream, they are going to recognize a Palestinian state in September at the UN General Assembly. It's coming in about a month and a half. Now, today, the UK is following suit and saying, essentially, unless there's a ceasefire, they too will recognize Palestinian statehood in September, again, at the UN General Assembly. Never mind what Israel wants. They are going to, France and possibly the UK, more on that in a minute, they're certainly threatening it. They are going to unilaterally declare a Palestinian state. And they don't care what Israel thinks about it. They're going to impose this upon Israel, whether Israel likes it or not, just a year and 8 months after the massacre perpetrated by the Palestinians, by Hamas Palestinians in Gaza. They will be essentially rewarded with their own state. And by the way, you might say, well, Israel doesn't have a say in it. Big deal. Oh, it is a big deal because any Palestinian state, every blueprint I've ever heard about it, means that Israel will be carved up. Half of Jerusalem, the ancient and ancestral capital of the people of Israel, given to the Palestinians. Large chunks of Judea and Samaria. The world calls it the West Bank. We call it Judea and Samaria because that's what the Bible calls it. And it is the biblical heartland. The majority of your Bible, prior to King David moving the kingdom to Jerusalem, the center of the kingdom of Jerusalem, took place in Judea and Samaria. So Israel, needless to say, has a stake in this, because you're talking about a country that's already only the size of the state of New Jersey, and you want to whittle it down to perhaps the size of, I don't know, Rhode Island, and they don't have a say in it. Isn't that something? We are going to declare this. We're going to say a Palestinian state exists. And if Israel says, we disagree, we don't want to give land up, this is crazy, they're attacking us, they don't recognize our right to exist. How can we recognize their right to exist as a nation state called Palestine if they don't recognize our right to exist as the state of Israel? They're attacking us on a daily basis, not only Hamas in Gaza, Judea and Samaria as well. A steady spate of attacks we've seen for years and years. And we've reported on this on the live stream, and including in the eastern half of Jerusalem. But the world doesn't seem to care. Folks, I can't think of any clearer indicator that we are living in biblical prophetic times. I said this last week when we talked about Macron announcing, hey, I'm going to recognize a Palestinian state. I'm declaring the existence of a Palestinian state. Me, Emmanuel Macron. Even though it doesn't exist, I'm going to speak it into existence. That's what he's saying in his arrogance. And in his attempts to curry favor with the growing, restive, radical Islamic population in his own country, in France. Same with the UK. No wonder they're taking a pro-Palestinian line. They're large and in many cases radicalized and self-segregating Muslim populations in France and the UK are vocally, would be an understatement, pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel. And they want to curry favor with those growing populations that they have let in through mass Muslim immigration, unchecked immigration, open borders. It has destroyed Western Europe. Go to London today. Folks, the difference in London today, and President Trump talked about this yesterday. He was in Scotland yesterday with Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister. More on him in a minute. But Trump said, you know, I don't know if I want to go to London, I guess, but the mayor of London's horrible. Sadiq Khan, who is a Muslim and a leftist. That's a lethal combination in all the wrong ways. Go to London today. And folks, I can tell you, every few years I'm in London, I'm doing productions in the UK, and I love the UK. Every few years you see the change in London. It becomes more pronounced and more obvious due to mass Muslim immigration. And Keir Starmer yesterday says, well, he's a friend of mine, about the mayor of London. And you got to love Trump. He says, well, he's doing a terrible job. Basically, I don't care if he's your friend. He's doing a terrible job. A little later in their meeting, Trump and Keir Starmer, Starmer was pressed about free speech in the UK. He said, we have a proud tradition of free speech. And yet, right before I came on here with you today, on X, I see a British man pulled over because he had the flag of St. George, the flag of England, in the back of his truck. And police apparently, according to this video, I'm just telling you what I saw, they questioned him about it. He's potentially dangerous because he's a patriot and a nationalist. He's an English patriot and an English nationalist who doesn't like the mass migrant immigration into his country from mostly Muslim nations, which are completely changing the character of the nation he knows and loves and grew up in. And that would have happened in the United States. It was happening if President Trump didn't say enough is enough. Thank God. America has been granted a reprieve from God Almighty with Trump returning to office. Europe needs its own versions of Trump. And hey, he's one of a kind. But Europe needs, he or she doesn't have to have all the characteristics of Donald Trump, but man, just some boldness, guts, resilience, and a willingness to stand up against the establishment and the deep state in their respective countries. It ain't easy. It takes a special kind of person with a spine of steel. Europe needs it. Europe needs to find these people right now. And my concern is that it'll be too far gone. By the time they step up, it's going to be a shambles already. I mean, the UK is a tinderbox, folks, because of this leftist government, which really despises its own people. That's a unique characteristic of the left. Whenever it gets in power, at the end of the day, it despises its own people. It treats them with disdain. Their traditions, their culture, their beliefs, and if they stand for faith, family, freedom, the left despises that. That is the antithesis of all that the left stands for, its entire ideology. So that's a unique and horrific characteristic, it seems, of every leftist government here in the West. They eventually turn against their own people. I'm not talking about pointing guns at their own people, but pointing lawfare at their own people, legal means, conservatives, Christians, whether it's Canada, the UK, Germany, France, the US pre-Donald Trump, the list goes on. And this all really, I said last week, sheep and goats, wheat and tares. I think there's a winnowing, there's a word for you, going on right now where God is kind of pruning. And where do the nations stand? Because when we're talking about dividing Jerusalem, I'm thinking of Zechariah 12. Folks, this is so biblical. It's so obvious what's happening. Zechariah 12, I'm paraphrasing here. I don't have the Bible in front of me right now. But God says, look, Jerusalem will become like a burdensome stone for the entire world. And although every nation comes against it, they covet Jerusalem. Anyone who touches Jerusalem will be cut to pieces. Well, guess what? Everyone wants a piece of Jerusalem. Radical Islamists, they want to make it a pillar of their caliphate. Think of Erdogan in Turkey. He's talked about Jerusalem and his coveting of Jerusalem a bunch. Radical Islam wants Jerusalem. The UN wants to carve up Jerusalem. Europe wants to carve up Jerusalem. Everyone wants a piece of Jerusalem. And folks, I can tell you, you're seeing it now. And October 7th was such a prophetic threshold in that, again, it really made the contrast and the dividing line very stark. Where do you line up? Are you with Israel or are you against Israel? And by extension, are you with the God of Israel or against the God of Israel? Because whether you like it or not, his promises to that tiny nation are eternal. That's the word God uses throughout his word. Eternal promises. And he says, not because they deserve it, but for my name's sake. That's what God says. It's an unconditional covenant. God's going to keep it. And I've said this before, I'll say it now. If God were to break his promises to Israel, what's to say he wouldn't break his promises to you and me? Why trust him? You trust and obey. It's the only way, right? I believe that. But why would you trust a God who just breaks any commitments, any promises, any covenants that he has with you on a personal level? It's not God's nature. He would never do it. He's a promise-keeping God. So I don't know how the replacement theology types and the so-called Christians who despise Israel and say, it's just another nation, has no impact, no standing in the world whatsoever. I don't know where they get that from scripturally. Put geopolitics aside. Scripturally, any fair reading, unless you've got scales over your eyes of the Old and New Testament, makes it pretty clear. God talks, when he's referring to Israel, days to come, latter days. Think of Amos. I've put you back in the land I have given you, never to be uprooted again. Who can look at the past 77 years and say, the rebirth of Israel on May 14th, 1948 was just a coincidence. It was just a happenstance of history. So this people, the most persecuted people in the history of the planet, they'd been dispersed, as the Bible said they would, to the four corners of the earth, quite literally, for, I don't know, practically 2,000 years. 2,000 years later, after the Romans destroyed the temple, after the Bar Kokhba revolt in AD 135, wraps up in AD 135. And there was always a Jewish remnant in the land, by the way. The land of Israel was never completely emptied of the Jewish people, but the vast majority, obviously, of descendants of Israel were scattered from the land. Nearly 2,000 years later, they return. Who ever heard of such a thing in human history? And they do so out of the ashes of the Holocaust after they're nearly wiped out. And they revived the Hebrew language. It became in regular use once again for the first time in about 2,500 years. Who ever heard of such a thing? You're going to sit here with a straight face and tell me, coincidence. It's just another nation. Those people in Israel today are not the people of biblical Israel. The rebirth, yeah, it's interesting, but, you know, it was just a coincidence. Not miraculous. God's hand was not in it in any shape or form whatsoever. I mean, the mere rebirth of Israel in 48 is proof enough. Miracle, God's hand. Can a nation be born in a day? Isaiah asked. Actually, it can. It happened on May 14th, 1948, the rebirth of Israel. But the rebirth is one thing. But what about these stunning victories? The 6-Day War, the 12-Day War, Nasrallah, Hanea, it goes on and on. Improbable Operation Exploding Pager against Hezbollah last September. Folks, it's so improbable what Israel's been able to do against all odds, fighting for the very existence for 77 years every day. You don't see God's hand in that at all? Wow. There's really, truly blinders. That's geopolitical, but you don't see God's hand in the scriptural. We're talking Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Psalms. This goes on about God's irrevocable, eternal promises to the nation of Israel, to the people of Israel. So before we get into the UK, this is my little preamble here, but it needs mentioning, and it needs to be continued to be drilled down. You can say, and Christians now, this is a growing thing in Christianity. Well, you know, that's a boomer thing. These old school prophetic Christians, and I'm not a boomer, I'm Gen X, by the way, proudly so, the second greatest generation. But you could say that it's just another nation. And again, many Christian replacement theology types who, it's interesting, are very solid theologically in other ways, in most ways. Some, not all, but some are very solid. I'm like, man, I line up with this guy. But then when it comes to Israel, it's like the blinders go up and they don't get it and they can't see it and they're not discerning. And they actually say it's just another nation. It's just another nation out of, many nations in the world. It has no particular role in God's plan for the nations. It's just another nation. Clearly, okay, you may believe that theologically, but even if you don't, no matter where you stand on it, clearly Israel is not just another nation. I mean, have you not noticed? Have you not scanned the headlines over the past, 77 years? In particular, the past year and 9 months since October 7th and the onset of the October 7th wars. The world is obsessed with Israel, this tiny sliver of land, again, the size of the state of New Jersey. I mean, obsessed, and usually not in a good way. Here's a tweet I want to read to you. Really good. It really sums it up. From Ollie London on X. Get this. This kind of summarizes the obsession. The UN, by the way, the UN has passed more resolutions against Israel than any other nation in history. Israel, not the Soviet Union, Castro's Cuba, Saddam's Iraq, Iran, Syria, China, North Korea. No, Israel. And you're telling me it's just another nation? There's not a special focus on this nation? Come on. Ollie London writes, over 5,600 people died from famine in Haiti in 2024. 5.4 million people in Haiti suffered crisis levels of hunger or worse last year. Over 1,000 people died from famine in Sudan in 2024. 700,000 children suffered from acute malnutrition in Sudan in 2024. Did you know that? Probably not. Although we have a very educated audience here on the channel. He points out, where was the global outcry? Sudan, Haiti, Syria, what just unfolded there? Where's the outcry? No, it's an obsession with Israel, only Israel. Israel is the cause of all the world's ills. If only Israel was gone, we'd have peace in the Middle East. We'd have world peace. This tiny nation with 10 million people, the size of the state of New Jersey, less than 0.1% of the world's overall population. This tiny fraction geographically and of a people, they are the cause of all the world's ills. People really, truly believe this. And guess what? It's demonic. Because the people of Israel, their continued existence against all odds, surviving, not only surviving, thriving against all odds. It's proof that God exists. Because God said, yeah, you'll be scattered. Then I'll bring you back in the latter days. And you'll be planted in your land, never to be uprooted again. Book of Amos. They're there to stay, folks. He's a promise-keeping God. You watch. But we see all this, not we, but many see all this and say, no. And Genesis 12:3, I'll bless those who bless you. God says to Abraham, I'll curse those who curse you. Yes, history bears it out. History bears it out. Where are the Nazis today? Where are the Philistines? Actually, the modern day Palestinians. Palestine is Philistia, the translation. Where is Haman, Pharaoh, the Assyrians, the Assyrian Empire, the Roman, the Greek Empire, the Amalekites, etc.? It goes on and on. The Jebusites, they're gone, but Israel, against all odds, survives. It has outlasted all of its enemies. How? It beggars belief. It defies any rational explanation. Only God. And how people don't see that, especially people who are followers of Jesus like myself, who know the word of God, who have discernment, who have the Holy Spirit. Man, I don't get it. That's a really tough one. I just don't get it. How you don't see what seems so clear to me. But the UK, and by the way, if you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe, click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. And we've got close to 1.1 million subscribers. Hard to believe. We're really growing. And you can follow us as well. Look, Facebook, Instagram, X, the @Stakelbeck Tonight channel as well. We have here 2 channels on YouTube. We have channel @Stakelbeck Tonight with clips from our nightly show on TBN. So we're keeping very busy for such a time as this. But the UK is demanding as I said at the top, demanding a Gaza ceasefire. And unless there's not a Gaza ceasefire, the UK is saying we will recognize a Palestinian state in September, unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza, Keir Starmer's office announced today. And there will be no annexation of the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria. That's the UK's demand. And the timing of the recognition would be at the UN General Assembly in front of the eyes of the world. The UK would come alongside France and do this. Now, there was a meeting today at the UN. France and the Saudis were running this meeting. And the essence of this meeting was a demand for a Palestinian state. Apparently, they did not line up and they couldn't agree to it. But a consensus, I guess you would say. But folks, there is momentum gathering. Ireland, Iceland, Norway, Slovenia, European nations, there's momentum gathering. They want a Palestinian state. They want to reward the Palestinians for October 7th. A state, look, Hamas in Gaza is one thing. Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah, look, the Palestinian Authority, is that Israel's so-called partner for peace we hear so much about? The Palestinian Authority has a program called Pay for Slay. It's the Martyrdom Fund, they call it, where if a Palestinian terrorist kills an Israeli, they get a lifetime stipend, their family, they or their family. They're rewarded for murdering, and they've killed Americans as well. They get rewarded for it. Mahmoud Abbas has not changed that policy. And you want to give them a state? I mean, it's just so insane. Again, this is a dividing line. Wheat and tares, sheep and goats, moral clarity. There was once a leader in the UK who had it in spades. Winston Churchill, Sir Winston Churchill, the legend, one of my heroes. And how the mighty have fallen. I mean, the UK is a shambles. France, Macron, beta male. It's a collection of beta males. The strongest of all of them is a female in Italy, Giorgia Meloni, who's shown strong conservative leadership in Italy. Orban in Hungary, of course. You've got some others. Geert Wilders in the Netherlands is great if he ever becomes prime minister of the Netherlands. There's a few others, but by and large, the EU and NATO are led by people who are weak and woke. Not all, but most. And Israel is a victim of that. I don't like to use the word victim when it comes to Israel, because Israel is a strong sovereign nation, but Israel is bearing the brunt of weak, woke madness in Europe in terms of Europe threatening sanctions and trying to strong-arm Israel. It factors in. So and the world is buying these lies about starvation in Gaza. My gosh, Israel's trying to send tons of food in. Hamas takes the food and they beat up the civilians. They take the aid, and the UN does not distribute the food. And only anyone with common sense can see this. It only adds to this perception of Israel as a genocidal state, intentionally starving the Palestinians. It's madness. But this narrative has taken hold. That's why it's very important that we do what we do here on the channel. So make sure to subscribe, support what we do. And there's even polls now from Gallup, which is one of the more trusted polling services here in the United States, showing that even American support for Israel's campaign in Gaza is decreasing markedly. Israel cannot leave Hamas in power. I mean, that's a no-brainer. Would we leave the Nazis in power during World War II or a remnant of Nazis? Israel is steadfast that it will destroy Hamas and get the hostages back. And they got to do what they got to do to simplify it. And this is going to intensify, folks, because Israel is going to try and do what it needs to do for security. And Europe is going to be banging the drum, shrill and anti-Israel. And the Arabs will pile on, Arab nations. Russia will pile on. Bibi, by the way, Netanyahu just spoke to Vladimir Putin yesterday on the phone. Everyone's going to pile on. Latin American countries. Some are very pro-Israel in Latin America. Some are the direct opposite. But you're living in Bible times. And Israel is God's timepiece. It's a canary in the coal mine prophetically. And Jerusalem, Israel is the center of the world geographically. Look at a map. Center of the world. Jerusalem is the center of that center. But again, all coincidence, right? Craziness. So glad to have you with us. We'll continue to set the record straight here. Until tomorrow, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.